was during the Salem witch trials, which didn't end well, so I'm hoping you'll be a lot kinder to me tonight. Before we start, I've just been asked to remind you about phones, to please have them switched off.
Oh.
Yep.
Lights no wash will pass it to you.
That's great, thank you.
It would be the same.
Right, so I'm Shannon. I'm a past life therapist. I've been a past life therapist for the past 7 years. And tonight I'm just going to give you a little bit of background into past life therapy and what it entails. But before we start, I'll just give you a little bit of background into me and who I am and how I got started. So I was born in Zimbabwe and I grew up in South Africa. Now I grew up in a Jehovah's Witness family. So this is not a religion that has the reincarnation theory or even entertains it. In fact, it doesn't entertain anything really that doesn't fit the witness narrative. So I was always taught never to believe anything spiritual or anything like this. But I was 10 years old when my very first spiritual experiences started. I had many throughout my childhood. When I was 10 years old was the very first time I found myself levitating off my bed. It was horrific, it was horrifying. And I did the only thing I knew to do, which was pray. My mother had always told me, if anything bad happens, just say in Jehovah's name and it'll go away, which is what I did. But it was at that point when I realized there's a whole lot more to the spiritual world than I'm being told, right? But I was 17 when my spirituality really took off. My mother had moved in with a partner of hers, and we moved into his home, and we found out that he was actually a serial murderer. And how this expanded my spirituality was that every bit of evidence that we found was given to us through spiritual means. So I had just started working with my mentor at the time. She was a Wiccan witch, and she was mentoring me in Wicca and Tarot. So I was developing, I was growing. And all the information that we were given was given to us either through my channeling or the tarot cards. We even had an angel apparition, which was brilliant. And also, one of the victims that he had murdered had previously lived in the house, and he started communicating with me almost immediately when I moved in. So it was through all those things that we uncovered probably one of the greatest horrors of my life. But needless to say, we left and we got out of there, and we realized that the angels had literally saved our lives. And that was that. I moved to Zimbabwe and I started working as a tarot reader for a little while, and then when I was 21 I came to England. When I came to England, I gravitated away from tarot a little bit and moved more into my angel readings and my angel cards. My connection with the angels kind of strengthened quite a bit. And then I got married and had my little girl, and I lived normal life for about 10 years. And then it was about that time, my daughter was 15 months old when I got divorced. And I was left scared and alone, trying to figure out how to be a new mummy. All my family was still in South Africa, and I didn't know what to do. So once again, I turned to my angels. And this is when I had to make some pretty bold decisions. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew that reading tarot was probably one of the most fulfilling times in my whole career. And I needed to do something like that. I needed to help people spiritually. And it was at that time I'd read Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. And brilliant book, you're nodding, you know. Brilliant book. This is all his accounts of his regressions that he's done. And that was it. I knew it. That was my path. It resonated with me, and the rest is history. Okay, so what is past life regression? So we're going to distinguish the difference between past life regression and past life therapy. I do both, obviously, but past life regression is basically when people go into hypnosis and we regress you so you can experience a past life. Now, of course, this has therapeutic value. It'll always have therapeutic value. But regression is more done out of interest or fascination for the subject, just so we can go see who we were, what we were doing, where we lived. Past life therapy is pretty much the same. We regress you into a past life, but usually this is to go and find a suppressed trauma. Now in past life, much the same as we do in this life, if we have a trauma and we suppress it, then this trauma will produce a symptom. And unfortunately, the traumas that we suppress in past lives, those symptoms will carry through and follow us through into our next life. So with past life therapy, we'll go back and we'll find those traumas, we'll release them, we'll feel the emotions and the feelings that we were supposed to have felt at the time, release them, and that produces healing. It takes away all the symptoms in this lifetime. So how do we achieve the regression? We do this through hypnotherapy. So hypnotherapy, as I was saying before, is very different to hypnotism. Hypnotism, you don't really know what you're doing, you can be controlled, whereas with hypnotherapy, you're very much in control the whole time. All it is really is a very deepened state of relaxation, hypnotherapy. And when we work with hypnotherapy, with regression, we are working with the right side of the brain, where our subconscious is situated. So we have the left side and the right side of the brain. The left side is the side that deals with your logic and your reason, your ability to make up lies, make up stories. And then your right side of the brain is basically like a huge big memory storage bank. So this only holds memory and automated responses, your subconscious, things like when you learn to ride a bike or tie your shoelaces, that all gets stored in the right side of your brain. So when we're under hypnosis, we can be sure that anything you're seeing during a regression is a true reflection, because this is just a memory. What we essentially do is put the left side of the brain to sleep, and we work only with the right side of the brain. So, like I say, the right side of the brain does not have the ability to lie or make up stories or rationalize. So what you're seeing would be a true memory. Okay. So, where do these past life memories come from? There's been a lot of debate over the years. Personally, I believe that these are real past life memories. There are too many correlations for me personally, having seen with my clients, case studies, everything else. Even things like birthmarks, we can match up dates and times and places. People often present with significant birthmarks, which is quite interesting, and we'll find that when we regress them back, they've had a trauma in the exact spot of the birthmark. So this is something like the body's way of reminding us. This is a physical symptom that reminds us that we have an unfinished trauma that we need to go and look at back in our past lives. Okay. Another one is a book that I'll never forget. We had to read this during our studies, and this, obviously, amongst many other things, has convinced me. It's a book called Yesterday's Children by Jenny Cockle. Very interesting story. This woman, right from a very young age, she had this sense or this feeling that something was wrong, that she'd left children behind. There was a part of her life that was missing, and she'd unfinished business, basically. And through a series of regressions, as she got older, she managed to piece together her life, her previous life, as a woman called Mary in Ireland. And this was, have you read the book? Brilliant. Okay, so this was absolutely fascinating for me. She even managed to draw a pretty detailed map from memory of this past life, of this little town in a very small place in Ireland. And as it turns out, as she progressed, she went and found everybody, and she found her children. I think she had 8 children, and she found them all in this current life, which was fantastic. So yes, for me, these are real past life memories. There's way too many correlations for them not to be. But I will discuss some of the alternative suggestions with you, because like with anything spiritual, it's what resonates. We can only hypothesize in the spiritual world, can't we? So the first one is the Akashic records. Some people say we tap into the Akashic records to gain these memories. So I see a lot of nods in the audience. So I'm presuming you all know what the Akashic records are. Yeah. Basically, it's a universal record of every thought, deed, action, and emotion that ever has happened, ever will happen, and this is imprinted onto the universal ether. So they say we can tap into that through our subconscious. Okay, just a theory. Then we have the higher self. Are we tapping into the higher self? Well, yes, I think theoretically we are, because the higher self is not much more than our subconscious, really. So are we tapping into our higher self? Very definitely. Genetic memory. Okay, so remember this one because I will touch on it again a bit later. Some people say that the memories of our ancestors are imprinted into our genetic code, into our DNA. So this would work very similarly to how you would imagine a hereditary disease to work, you know, hereditary heart problems or cancer, something like that. Our genetic code retains that memory from our parents, and we then develop these diseases. And they say that these memories can work in pretty much the same way. But again, the correlations for me are too close to our own lives and our own symptoms for it to be genetic memory of somebody else. Then we have pure fantasy. Could be. We could just be making it all up. But my argument is, if we're doing the therapy and the therapy is working and it's taking away these symptoms, then the therapy works. So whether it's made up or not, but I really don't think so. There is one point that's worth touching on though with the fantasy theory. And this is, sometimes people will present with something called subconscious resistance. And subconscious resistance is basically when we have a trauma that's too traumatic for us to look at. Sometimes we know the pain that we're going to experience, and the brain will shut down and not want to let us see that pain or that trauma. So what it will then do, and again, this is not very common, but sometimes it'll show things to us metaphorically or symbolically, but it'll always be a true representation of the trauma that we need to go and fix. Okay. Right, so to understand past life regression, we need to understand the purpose of reincarnation, which is something that I'm sure as spiritual people you're all very much aware of, the basics of. So basically the purpose of reincarnation is to learn and grow and evolve. So we do this lifetime lessons, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime in order to evolve. Okay. We also do this to balance karma with people. Okay, so we'll always collect karma along the way with certain people. And if we don't fix that karma or balance it out within a certain lifetime, it'll follow us through into the next lifetime and present again in order for us to balance it or fix it. Okay. So these lessons and this evolution is gained through our life experiences. And in order to have these life experiences, we have to be presented with them. And the way that happens is through our soul groups. So the way I understand it, and my view on it, is as souls, we collaborate on the other side, and we decide, right, we're going to incarnate together in this group, and we're all going to help each other learn the certain lessons that we need to learn. So these then become our soul groups, and we will tend to incarnate over and over again with the same soul groups. And this doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to incarnate in consecutive lifetimes. We can have some lifetimes with some of our soul group and other lifetimes with others from our soul group. And from these soul groups, like I say, we mutually learn and benefit from each other. So let's look at the soul types that we can incarnate with, or that make up our soul groups. So first of all, we have our soul mates. And soulmates, there's a bit of a misconception with soulmates. Most people believe that soulmates are the person that we are supposed to be with, our lovers, our husbands, our wives, our partners. But what soulmates actually are the individuals within our soul group that we interact with. We can recognize our soulmates. There's probably many soulmates sat in this room. Then we have soul groups, which I've just explained, and karmic partners. So karmic partners are two souls that have a karmic imbalance that they need to sort out. And then, if, like I said before, if they don't sort it out during one lifetime, they'll incarnate together over and over again to balance out these karmas. And then we have twin souls or twin flames. So this is probably more like what the accepted version of a soulmate is. So our twin flame is the other half of ourselves, so the yin to our yang, basically. And this other half resides in spirit while we incarnate, and it keeps us connected to Source, and it guides us throughout our lifetime. And it is said that we will only ever incarnate with our twin flame on our last incarnation. But again, it's debatable with everything in spirituality. we do this vice versa as well. So when our twin flame incarnates on earth, we stay, help them connected to source. Okay. So now let's get into it. What can we do with past life therapy? The scope is wide. The basis of all past life therapy, as I said before, is healing. Okay, so healing on many forms. So we're going to look at some of the conventional and not so conventional healing that can take place with past life therapy. The first one is fears and phobia. So show of hands, how many of you have an irrational fear or phobia? Spiders? Baked beans? Okay, so phobia.
It's not as bad as it used to be, but
It's there. Many people experience these irrational fears or phobias. Okay. So this can be helped usually if there's no underlying cause or there's no reason, much like spiders, for example. If nothing's ever happened to you in this lifetime that you should be afraid of spiders or whatever the fear is, then this is usually linked to a past life trauma, a trauma that's been suppressed and not dealt with. We can fix this through past life regression. Now, I'm very limited to what I can discuss about my clients. Obviously, it's confidential, but I can give you one of my own examples to demonstrate. So we're talking about irrational fears and phobias. When my daughter was born, I had this extremely irrational fear that she was going to be taken away from me. Now, for some reason, I don't know why, I had connected this fear to social services. There's no reason in this world why social services should be involved in my life, but somehow I was so afraid that they were going to take her away. And this was debilitating. The anxiety that I would get, the fear, I would cry, I would be physically sick at the thought of my daughter being taken away. And I decided I needed to go for regression and I needed to get this sorted because there was obviously an unresolved issue there. So I went for my regression and I found myself in a life in Chicago, in America, in the 1930s somewhere. And I looked down, I could see myself all dressed in 1930s clothing. To my right was a stage, and I knew I belonged on that stage. I didn't know if I was a dancer or a singer or what I was, but I was in this bar or pub bar type place. And right in front of me was the bar with a man who I recognized. But my connection happened when I saw there was a little black boy behind the bar, and his name was Sean. And back in the 30s, the racism would still have been rife. There was very much this division between black and white. And my understanding or my feeling was that Sean had been orphaned and he was allowed to work in this bar. He was just carrying crates of bottles around. Now what we do in hypnotherapy, if no trauma presents, we can move forward or backwards within that lifetime and we can go to another significant point, which is what I did. I moved to the next significant point in that lifetime. And when I got there, I found myself standing in my garden, looking at my home, and my husband at the time was standing at the front door with his arms folded, and he was very solemn. And he looked at me as if to say, "This is your fault. You decided to adopt this black boy. This is your fault." And I looked over to my right, and I had adopted this boy, Sean. He was my baby. He was my child. And he was about 17 or 18 years old at this point. And there were all these men standing in the garden, and it had a very Ku Kluxy feel to it. There were no hoods or anything, but they had sticks and fire, and it felt quite religious. And they had my baby hanging from a tree. They killed him because of the colour of his skin. And I fell to my knees and I cried and I grieved. And for about 3 weeks after this, I cried and I grieved and I felt real pain and real emotion. And this is called an abreaction. So in hypnotherapy, an abreaction is just the release of the emotions. And depending on the scale of the trauma, this can carry on for about 2 or 3 weeks. And I grieved for my baby. But the point was, my fear in this lifetime for my daughter dissipated. I mean, of course, I have the same fear that every other mother has for their child, but my intense anxiety had gone. So that was an irrational fear that was cured through past life therapy. Now I just want to give you one more example because this relates to the DNA memory I told you about before. So this is a case study I read about a lady who, when she turned 40 years old, she suddenly developed this intense fear of water. And this was very irrational. Nobody could figure out why. It just suddenly appeared when she turned 40 years old. And she exhausted all other options, doctors, psychologists, all the rest of it. And finally, she settled on regression. And when they regressed her, they had found that when she had turned 40 in her past life, she had drowned rather traumatically. And she'd obviously suppressed this because she hadn't had time to deal with it before she passed. And her DNA had somehow retained this memory of her being 40 years old and drowning, and when she turned 40 in this lifetime, it triggered her and the fear came back. But of course, through regression, she released the trauma and the fear went away. Then we look at unusual physical symptoms. This includes pain with no cause. So sometimes we'll have people, and this is quite common, we'll have people present with a pain in their body, so a heartache or sometimes we have deformities that there's no reason for. And this, quite often, if there's no cause for it in this lifetime, will be a past life trauma that again needs looking at, okay? And much like the birthmark, this will be a physical manifestation of, hey, we've got an issue here, we need to go back and sort it, okay? So a lot of this is then relieved, the pain is relieved through releasing the trauma. Okay. Now, this is a nice one. Finding familiar people. How many of you have ever met a person and gone, oh my gosh, I know you? Yes, many people have this. This is soul recognition. So this is going to be recognizing a soul or soulmate from your soul group. Now, soul recognition doesn't always have to happen in the positive. Usually it's a positive feeling of, oh, I know you, I feel so close to you. But soul recognition can also happen in the negative. So this is in the cases where we have karmic partners that we meet in this lifetime. People we've had a lot of karmic past with and we've still got imbalances. Sometimes you'll just meet people and go, I don't like you, I don't know why, you just give me the heebie-jeebies and I just don't like you. And that is a soul recognition of a karmic partner most of the time. So in regression, absolutely, we can go back and we can find out what the connection is between the two of you. We can go and see if you've lived past lives together and what the history is between you. So that's a lovely thing we can do. Then we have grief. Now, grief is hard for everybody, but very often you'll have some people that just can't cope with the death of a loved one. And it almost feels as though a part of you has died with them. And in some cases this is true. This is something called soul fragmentation, which I'm going to go into detail a little bit later. But what we can do with the grief therapy is in hypnotherapy we have a safe space. So this is usually a garden of sorts. And we can take you into the garden and we can call forward your deceased loved one, and we can actually communicate with them. Now, I've done this many times in my career, and it's beautiful to watch because the emotions that are experienced are very real, and the accounts that people give to me are, I could smell them, I could feel them, everything was so real. There's not a doubt in their mind that their loved one was genuinely there. And of course, especially in the case of where there's a forgiveness that needs to happen, or if they've passed and there've been things you've not said to them, this can all be quelled by seeing them in this safe space. And it is very healing. Sometimes, this doesn't happen often, but sometimes the loved one won't be able to come through, but they will always send a replacement in that case. So it'll be somebody that you're familiar with who's passed, who will come through to be able to answer your questions and bring comfort, or it'll be in the form of a guide. So sometimes a guide will come and explain it all to you. Right, I might need a sip of water for this one. This is a very vast topic. Now, in advanced past life regression, we've got to be prepared for every eventuality. So we study everything. And what we can do in a past life regression is something called spirit release. Okay. So I'm sure you'll all be aware that spirit can attach to us. Now, this is particularly common in somebody who is spiritually developing, and they're doing a lot of meditation and they're raising their vibration. And obviously this behaves like a moth to the flame for these souls or these entities that are attracted to us. But also, it can happen when we have the opposite. So when we have a very low vibration, it becomes very easy for them to attach to us. So, for example, the continued use of drugs and alcohol, this is going to lower your vibration, it's going to allow an attachment. Also a negative aura, so in some cases of depression or abuse, violence, we've got domestic abuse or something like that, it becomes very easy. So what is it that attaches? We can have everything from lost souls to dark entities. I've even heard of elementals attaching to people. And it's possible through hypnosis, excuse me, it's possible through hypnosis to communicate and negotiate with these entities. So in the case of a lost soul, for example, we can communicate with that lost soul under hypnosis, and we can ask them for a name of a loved one to come through and release them. Now, this is not very common. Like I say, spirit release is not common at all in hypnotherapy, but we have to be prepared. This is better done by somebody who's a very good psychic or medium or very comfortable dealing with dark entities. Personally, I've dealt with one too many dark entities in my life, and I'm not prepared to do it again. So this is down to the individual therapist. Dark entities can be very cunning, as you all know, and they could potentially masquerade as a lost soul. So personally, it's not something I'm willing to take on, but this can be achieved through past life therapy. And then we have soul retrieval. So I spoke earlier about soul fragmentation. Now, what soul fragmentation is, this can occur in many, many ways, but the root of soul fragmentation is always trauma. Okay, so this occurs when part of your soul breaks away. And this usually stays at the location of the area that it breaks away at. So this can be either broken or stolen or taken by somebody who shares our energy. And until we find this missing part of our soul, this missing fragment of our soul, we tend to live our lives in response to this missing part. Okay. So examples of soul fragmentation could be an injury that affects our spirit, our physical and our aura. So a car crash, that's very traumatic, the impact. A piece of our soul can fragment and stay at the location. A broken heart or a lost love, so that works very much the same principle as what grief does. So when, like I say, when we share energy with somebody, sometimes when they go away or we lose them, it feels like a part of us has gone with them, and sometimes that's true, sometimes that happens, our soul fragments. And being torn away from a place that you love. So in cases of war times, perhaps, if you've lived in your home, in your country for all this time, and you are forcibly removed, you'll often hear people say, oh, my heart is in France, or my heart is in Spain. Sometimes that's literal. A piece of their soul will fragment and stay there if they've been torn away. And then separating from a part of you that you consider bad because of your past deeds. So perhaps somebody who's lived a rather unsavory life and then decides to make changes. What they'll do is they'll almost disassociate themselves from that old them, from the old part of them, and that piece of their soul fragments off. So, like I say before, that fragment usually stays at the location of the trauma. So what we have to then do is go back to the point of trauma, to the location of the trauma, and we have to find the piece of the soul. Now this is down to the therapist to know and understand whether or not soul fragmentation has occurred. It won't always be the case with every trauma. But we can go back to the location and we can go and find this bit of the soul that's fragmented. And this will usually present as like a grey shadow or a ghost, or it'll be some kind of energy that you will recognize, but it'll be almost like a faded energy of your former self, but you will always recognize this. And what we need to do then is we can go and reintegrate that soul fragment back into our bodies. And this is beautiful to watch. It's absolutely beautiful to watch. The relief in people where I feel whole, I feel better, I feel fixed. They've been living their life in response to this missing part for all this time, sometimes lifetimes. And to have it back, it suddenly makes you feel whole again. So I'll give you a little example of probably the best soul fragmentation case I've ever done. This was a very new one to me. I'd never done this before. Obviously soul fragmentation I had, but my friend Adele, she's a wonderful psychic. She does spirit release. She's incredibly powerful. And something I'd only ever heard of in theory before is when a very talented psychic who has a close link to the client can work on behalf of the client. And we were trying to regress her partner, and we were coming up against a lot of subconscious resistance with him. Obviously his trauma was just too difficult to look at, and he couldn't go under. So she suggested that we work on his behalf. If I regressed her, put her under, and she could work on his behalf, which is what we did. And he was in the room with us, so he was able to come along on the journey and just feel more comfortable. And she went and found 3 different lifetimes where his soul had fragmented 3 different times. And that was phenomenal. I'd never seen that in my entire career before. But we reintegrated and all his symptoms dissipated, which was beautiful to watch. Okay, let's get controversial. Alien abduction. Okay. So, again, this is not something I've personally encountered in past life therapy, but we have to be prepared. I have read many case studies where therapists have encountered this. Now, we have many claims of abduction throughout the world, and we'll generally find that with abductees, they don't tend to only get abducted once. They will generally have continued abduction, and because of the contract, our part in this is dealing with the contract. Now what happens is these abductees are usually forced into some kind of soul contract with these beings. And these contracts usually involve things like fertility issues or experimentation. Now because it's a soul contract, it follows you from lifetime to lifetime. And what we can do is we can go back to the original point of abduction, and we can break this contract and get rid of it. And this has been said through the case studies I've read to have stopped the abductions. So that is brilliant. I love this one. This is my favorite. And this is life between lives. Now, this is not something I've had a lot of experience with because it is rather difficult to achieve, but I'm definitely going to be doing some more study on this subject in particular. So life between lives, everybody during a regression will be given the opportunity to experience their death. 9 times out of 10 people will choose to experience it. And I've been told this is probably one of the most fulfilling, beautiful parts of the regression. People say the peace and the warmth that they feel is overwhelming. And obviously you will have all read stories of near-death experiences where people say the same. They just didn't want to come back because it was just so beautiful. So when people die in a past life, what usually happens is they'll either wind up back on the pathway where we've got all the doors, or they'll just slip straight into their next life. With life between lives, what we can do is we can go see what happens between the point of death and reincarnation. So in other words, let's go see what the other side is all about. That is so amazing to me. Now, I've done this twice in my career. But like I say, it is very difficult to achieve. This is because when we die, our bodies return to its natural state of vibration, which is obviously much higher vibration than what we experience here in our 3D consciousness. And because of this higher vibration, people tend to experience almost like a spinning vortex feeling, swirling colors, and nausea. Nausea is quite a common one, which is why it's not as easy for most people. But somebody who's quite good at meditation, or somebody who does meditation quite often, will be used to this higher vibration, and they'll have a much easier time achieving this life between lives. So in the ones that I've done and the case studies I've read, there've been many correlations, especially with a book that I absolutely love. It was a book by Sylvia Brown called Life on the Other Side. And she gives a very detailed description of the other side, of the buildings, of the experiences, of the processes. And what I was seeing with my clients, my case studies, and this book were all correlating beautifully, which was mind-blowing. I mean, these people are on opposite ends of the world, and they're all experiencing the same thing. So yes, even though this is not easily achieved, it's certainly something that I would love to delve into more. Right, then we can regain energy. So how many times have you been with a person and you feel tired and drained? I have a friend, yes. I have a friend like that. She's beautiful and I love her, but I have to protect my energy every single time I go visit her, because you just come away just feeling exhausted. And this is a very mild form of energy stealing. Okay. So the regaining of energy that we talk about under past life regression is more of an energy that's stolen through trauma. Okay, so in the form of abuse, for example. So once again, until we've found and regained this energy, we live our lives in response to this missing energy. Okay, so this is going to cause all sorts of symptoms. So for example, anxiety and shyness, self-worth issues, even agoraphobia in extreme cases. It always produces symptom when we're missing this energy. So once again, back to the point of trauma, deal with it, release it, and the symptoms go away. And this works very much the same as what it does in soul fragmentation. So we will see our energy actually protruding from this person. Because first we'll go and deal with the trauma, which means we'll be face to face with this person. And we'll see energy protruding from them. So again, it'll be like a shadow or a cloud or an energy that comes out of them. And we can then call, this is easier to do than soul fragmentation, because we just call back that energy. It's our energy, it recognizes us. And I'll always ask the client, where in your body does this energy settle? And this will give us a better clue as to where the trauma is or where the client's been affected. Okay. And then we've got cutting cords, which I'm sure every single one of you must have done at some point in your lives. This works very much in conjunction with regaining energy. So once we've regained our energy, we now have to cut the cord between ourselves and our karmic counterpart. So again, I'm sure we're all very familiar with the concept, but we can do that as well in conjunction with the regaining of energy. Right, so some other experiences. I often get asked if we can incarnate as animals. And the short answer is yes, but this is not very common. So animals belong to a separate soul group, to a very different soul group to what we do. And it's not very often we can learn a human lesson in animal form. So we do incarnate as animals. Like I say, it's not very common, but there's got to be a very specific instance. So for example, if somebody decides, as we know, pets are magical. They help us, they heal us. Apart from my puppy, who's terrible. But pets are magical. Every now and again we can choose to incarnate as an animal in order to help one of our soulmates on their journey in a way that only a pet can help. Or if we have a situation where we can only learn a human lesson as an animal. So for example, somebody who abuses animals and they see them as nothing more than soulless meat, and they need to understand that animals can feel the same as us, they have the same experiences, they experience trauma the same way as we do. They could then choose to incarnate as an animal to experience that human lesson, that empathy. Okay. Then we have otherworldly beings. Okay, so this has been a very, very large part of my regressions just lately. So, as we know, we are going through one of the greatest spiritual evolutions that mankind has ever gone through. We are evolving very rapidly at this time. And with that, we are going to have many star seeds and crystal and indigo and rainbow children that are all incarnating now. And their purpose is to help us evolve our society into something better. So, like I say, whatever you believe about other entities, we have to be prepared You know, when you've got your client telling you, oh, I'm now on the planet Zog and I describe myself as having a light body, we need to know what to do. We need to know how to help these people. So yes, this has been a huge part of my regressions just lately with all the star seeds incarnating. And what we're getting are accounts of other planets and other societies. And this brings about almost like a sudden understanding of purpose. Suddenly they know what their purpose is here in this lifetime. And it's generally got to do with helping the evolution of humanity. Now, when we look at these other societies, we can take the knowledge from a lot of these societies or these other planets or these other worlds will be a lot more advanced than what we are. And the whole purpose of this is to go and take the knowledge that we find there and bring it back here to help humanity. So this hidden knowledge, we don't only have to get this from another planet or another society, we can also gain this hidden knowledge from our lifetimes here on Earth. Now, the fact that you're all spiritually aware tells me that you've more than likely lived, if not one, a few lifetimes as healers, teachers, witches, sages, something like that. And we can go back in this lifetime and regain some knowledge from our lifetimes as healers. So what was before only in our subconscious, we can bring this knowledge forward into our conscious minds. And of course, again, the goal is to help humanity. Okay. Right, and then lastly, we are going to cover future life progression. So this is something that I do as well, and it's a subject all on its own, but I'll cover it very briefly here for you. So with future life progression, we can go and visit future lifetimes, and we can also go and visit the future within this lifetime. But the thing to understand with future life progression is the fact that future is fluid. So we can only ever see the future based on our current position. So this will be the same as if you go to any psychic or have any tarot reading or card reading. I'll always tell my clients when I'm reading, I can show you the path that you're on based on where you are now. If you don't like what you see on this path, great, change it. You know, future's fluid, we can do that. So how can these future lifetimes be helpful to us? So the first thing, like I say, we can go and explore future lifetimes. And we can see the path that we're on now in our current lifetime, our evolutionary path. If we go into a future lifetime and we pick up things like cycles that are being repeated, then we know we have to come back and fix something. So for example, if we're not learning our lessons, those cycles will continually be repeated and repeated. The lesson will be presented over and over and over again until we finally learn it. So if we look in a future lifetime, and in this lifetime we always get into abusive relationships, and we go there and we say, oh gosh, I'm in an abusive relationship, right? There's something I need to fix here, otherwise this cycle's going to continue. So that is lovely in itself. But we can also see how humanity as a whole is progressing. This is very interesting to see. What are we doing as a society? Where are we going? What does society look like in our future lifetime? You know, do we have flying cars? Are we happy? Are we living sustainably? Are we zombies? I don't know. You know, where are we headed? That depends on what we're doing right now. And then whatever we see in that future lifetime, it's down to each and every single one of us as individuals to change things if we don't like it. Okay. Then we can see things in our own current future. So again, we can go straight down the path and we can look at our life as a whole. And we can say, this is where we headed in our lifetime. Do we like it? Yes, great, we'll keep doing that. Don't we like it? Okay, we'll just change something. But the nice thing about looking at the future is that we can do something called a future choices meditation. And this is something I've experienced myself. And again, apologies, I keep using my own examples, but I'm very limited to what I can discuss about my clients. So when I went for future progression, I had a dilemma. And I wanted to know whether or not I should be staying in the relationship that I was in. And when we go, we can look down two different paths. So this was the path of me staying with him, and this was the path of me leaving him. And then on each path, we can look 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years down the line to see what that looks like, what does that feel like, what are we experiencing. And the same applies for leaving, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years down the line. Now, like I say, the future is fluid, so they will always show you things that you can pick up on so you can get the general idea of where you're headed. But sometimes it'll throw in some symbolic things for you to look at as well. So, for example, when I went a year down the line of the path with staying with him, I found myself standing at his window in his flat, and the feelings were very real. I was very sad. I was very disappointed. I just felt this feeling of, oh, he's still out drinking, nothing's changed. Those feelings were real. 3 years down the line, this is where the symbolic bit comes in. They showed me a door that was almost like a huge big prison iron cast door with bars on it. And this is telling me if I stay in this relationship, I'm just going to be stuck in prison. And I went to the path of leaving him. And 3 years down the line, I found myself with a new partner. And I never saw the face of my new partner, but I felt his essence, I felt his energy, and it was beautiful. I could always only see the back of him. And this is where I say it'll show you specific instances. So for example, it showed me going into my partner's lounge, and he was sitting on the sofa. It showed me a very specific picture on the wall, very detailed, very specific. I could see the material that the sofa was made from. I could see the color of the sofa. I could see his window in his lounge, and I could see the patterns on the curtain, and I could also see the view from his window. And when I met my current partner, a lot of this came to be. I recognized almost everything from my regression, from my progression. So yes, that's the kind of thing that we can do. It's absolutely helpful in helping us to make decisions. You can just get a general idea. But we can not only look at our choice when we're going on these paths. So for example, my dilemma was, do I stay or do I go? When we're down either side, either path, we can also look at things like, where am I working? Where am I living? How do I feel in my current job? What am I earning? What are my children doing? You can look at the whole scope of everything while you're down these paths, and you can decide how your choice will affect the rest of your life as well. So this is just a summary of the fascinating world of past life regression. I lost my premises after the first lockdown, and I was very sad about this, but you know, this has turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I've now decided to move my business online. So the regressions and past life therapy is definitely very much been able to achieve online. It's broadened my scope. The universe has, you know, miracles of working wondrous ways, because now my reach is global. I have clients in Canada, in Israel, and South Africa, and all over England. So this is turning out to be very exciting working online. But nonetheless, I'm truly blessed to be doing this work, and I want to thank you all very much for listening tonight. And I'll take some questions if anybody's got any.
I think there's too many to ask.